While Jesus was here on earth, he tended to draw a bit of a crowd. Often after his teachings, there would be a lot of people who would want to interact with him. After one teaching specifically in Matthew chapter 19, which is where we'll be reading from today, we see that a group of children come running up to Jesus, arms wide open. Now the disciples, they're kind of repulsed by this, and they say, "No, go away." Jesus turns to them and rebukes them and says, "Hey, you know what, it's okay. Let the little children come to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to those such as these." Immediately after this happens, there's a young man who comes up to Jesus and he's like, "Hey Jesus, you know, it'd be great. I would love to be part of the kingdom of heaven. What do I have to do?" And Jesus is like, "Well, you got to keep the commandments." And the guy's like, yeah, I've done that. I keep the law. I'm a good person. I give. I make sure I'm atoning for my sins. Like, I've got this." And Jesus simply turns to him and says in Matthew 19, verses 20-21, "If you want to be perfect, go, sell your possessions, give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me." Now, what do we see here that is so similar between the rich man and the children? Honestly, not that much. Their posture of submission is completely different, which I believe is the main theme that Jesus is trying to communicate here. The children come running up to Jesus with open arms, saying, "Take me, take my current situation, take all that I have." The rich man, on the other hand, he's hesitant. He wants to earn his salvation. He doesn't necessarily trust Jesus with where he's at. Now, this may have freaked out the disciples a little bit, because as soon as the rich man leaves, they kind of turn to Jesus and say, "Hey, if it's nearly impossible for this righteous man to enter the kingdom of heaven, how can anybody be saved?" And in Matthew 19, verse 26, we see the answer that Jesus gives. He says, "With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible." It is God who perfects our faith. We put our faith in Christ, and by human standards, our faith will never be perfect. We'll have our moments of doubt, our moments of weakness. We'll have those moments where we want to cling to things on earth that say, "This gives me comfort right now, I have faith in this." But what God does is he allows us to become like the little children, to approach him with boldness and humility and say, "I trust you in my situation." So my challenge for you today is to prayerfully examine your heart and say, "Hey God, maybe I'm struggling in this area after all." And don't just keep it between you and God. Go find somebody who you trust and perhaps share this with them. Say, "Hey, I'm really struggling with trusting God in this area of finances, or this area of relationships, or education." Whatever it might be, God is truly there to listen, and he cares for you. He hears your prayers, and he is here to walk with you. Because we are not perfect on our own. There's nothing that we can do that's going to achieve that. But knowing that we put our faith in Christ, a perfect God who loves and cares for each one of us dearly, that is great comfort. We can approach him like children because we are God's children.